Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. This is Office Hours with Professor S here at Socialism for All. This would be another live stream. I'm a reluctant live streamer. It's a thing people do. But this is an anti-debate bro stream. And we're not out to... I don't know. I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm here to learn as much as anybody else. I like to focus on the pre-recorded content that I put up on the channel, put a lot of thought into it, all that kind of stuff. Doing stuff off the cuff. This is a bit more like a Twitter engagement or something. Like I like to think I have some idea of what I'm talking about on some subjects, but it's more of a conversation, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. All that said, typical things like don't feed the troll. I don't see any trolls or anything in the chat, but just let me kick them out of the chat. Because, I would like this to be more of a kind of conversation, discussion situation than anything else. So, all right, let's get into the chat. There was somebody was asking, thoughts on David Graeber, who is an author, and I believe, a U.S.-based anarchist. I think he died recently, like a few years ago. Anyway, he had written a bunch of books which were pretty widely read, like Debt, the First 5,000 Years or something like that. I watched some interviews with him, and it seems, like ahead of probably most people in the U.S. and whatever. My general thought, though, is that it's time to move on from anarchism. I've done criticisms of anarchism on the YouTube channel, just as Lenin and Stalin and Marx and Engels did criticisms of anarchism, and I try to do them in that vein, and I've done audiobooks. Actually, there's a playlist on the channel, Marxists on Anarchism. There's probably 12 or 15 videos in that. And I think it's time for people, especially people in the first, imperial core, whatever we're calling it these days, it's time to move on from anarchism. I just don't think it really gets people anywhere. In fact, I've been kind of flirting with the idea. I haven't done any sock them gang or breadtube gang videos in a while. I've been kind of flirting with the idea. People always ask for those. I feel like people have stopped asking for them because they just feel like I'm never going to do them. But I've been toying with the idea of maybe doing some sock them gang things. So I don't know. Maybe you'll see some more sort of anarchist criticisms. I feel in general, just like with everything going on, there's a lot of important audiobooks and just sort of things on the theory front that I'd like to cover. Plus, I feel like I have moved my sock them gang budget over into like covering COVID and things like that, which I think that's more important, honestly. Though, I don't know, once a month I could probably do a burst of those, but just kind of depends on what's going on, both in the world and with me. Sometimes I have more energy to do this channel, sometimes I have less, and, shout out to the patrons, by the way. We're at like 105 people supporting currently at varying levels, which is amazing. Everything from $2 to $100 a month, and everywhere in between. I really appreciate that, and if you like this channel, thank a patron, because I would be doing less content if it weren't for all that support, and consider becoming one yourself. All right, there's the pitch. But I think it's time to move on from anarchism, and I think it's important to have respectful, critical dialogue with anarchists to the extent that, you can pull it off. I mean, I try not to get into really vitriolic stuff with anarchists, but, they have some of the right ideas, but you got to move on from that. Along those lines in the chat, somebody asks, have I read any anarchist theory? The comment continues, I haven't, and it seems like the whole community is pretty decentralized in who they follow as far as teachings. I mean, you could say that in some ways about the Marxist world, as far as, I don't know if I'd use the word decentralized, it's an anarchist buzzword, but, you definitely have different strains of Marxism as far as like people's interpretations and people's, preferred historical implementations of Marxism and Marxism-Leninism, and there's a lot of sort of splits of opinion over how things turned out in history. Hopefully, there's a fair amount of unity at the end of the day. Yeah, as far as anarchists, I mean, you have kind of black flag anarchists, which there will be some social anarchists in there, but not necessarily. Some are kind of more purely individualist anarchists. You have more overtly social anarchists, the ANCOMs, people like that. You have mutualists, which to me is kind of like co-ops for petty bourgeois people. Like, it's not quite as far as like right libertarianism, but it's kind of the halfway ground between, well, and they even use the orange and black, right? Like, it's kind of halfway between the red and black and the yellow and black. So, which is, of course, ANCOM, anarcho-communist, and then the anarcho-capitalists use the yellow and black. So it's kind of in the middle to me, from what I've read of like mutualist stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't like it. Yes, I have read some anarchist theory. And you're right. I mean, there's less unity there, that I would say, than within Marxism. I mean, the basic idea is, as another commenter points out, anarchism is the theory of the liberation of the individual will lead to revolution. That's stupid as shit, though, the commenter added. Yeah, so of all the Marxist things that I've read, probably Stalin attacks that idea the most. And this was long before he became Stalin of the USSR. This was like back in 1905. Yeah, just the theory of liberation of the individual. It's kind of more of a bourgeois idea, honestly. So, yeah, I've read some. I mean, the thing that I probably like the most is, well, I was going to say, I like really early IWW writings as far as like U.S. socialist history goes. The early IWW from like 1905, there was a lot of like actual socialists there doing, a mass scale organization that was oriented both around, regular trade union stuff like better conditions, but also revolution. So that was like pretty amazing. Unfortunately, they split for a number of reasons over whether to embrace a party. Anyway, it kind of got taken over by like fairly dogmatic anarchists, in my opinion. Though for a while they were sort of principled industrial unionists. And I mean, there's the question of like, do you put industrial unionists in the anarchist world? Because, yeah, I've read, I mean, that's about, actually that's not true. Probably the most anarchist literature that I've read has been in the anarcho-syndicalist or industrial unionist type of line. That's like, quantity-wise, what I've read the most. It doesn't really incorporate the idea of the proletarian party or, things like that. But I think otherwise, I mean, there are a lot of strong ideas in there in terms of, like, having a militant, radical labor movement that is primed for revolution and that has a trade union federation which is actually capable of taking over industry. I think that those are great ideas. Unfortunately, when it gets sort of bogged down with like really dogmatic anarchist takes that are like, we need to abolish the state from day one. Well, first of all, I mean, in the case of the Wobblies, you had the one big union idea. I mean, sort of like workers' councils to run industry. So, again, that's what I've read the most of quantity-wise because it seemed like sort of the best out of the bunch. Aside from that, I mean, yeah, I've read other weird stuff like, what's it called? Back in the 90s, TAZ, the Temporary Autonomous Zone, and like other stuff that you would find in info shops and like that Crime Think puts out, stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, I don't really like it. And, after considering a lot of that stuff, I came back firmly to Marxism. And, Marxism has its issues too. I feel like on the whole it's much better, and with more people participating in it, it could be even better. So, yeah, anyway. And then somebody says that Derek Varn Vlog on YouTube criticizes Graeber, with whom this whole thing started. Okay, never heard of, but thank you for the reference. Another thing, have I done any videos on past anarchist experiments? Did they get anything of value done in their short lifespan? So I haven't done like the Machno video or anything like that. I think that the closest I've done video-wise on past anarchist experiments is I did an audiobook of Marx and Engels, The Bakuninists at Work from 1873, which is an account by Marx and Engels of the influence of anarchists within the Spanish bourgeois revolution in the late 1860s and early 1870s, and how anarchist ideology sabotaged, really jeopardized the entire movement and allowed forces of reaction to have kind of sweeping victories with very few troops because the revolutionaries were so disorganized and there was no, I mean, beyond even it being decentralized, there was like no coordination between anything. It was a shit show from the sound of it. That's probably the closest that I've done to date as far as videos on past anarchist experiments. But I mean, yeah, generally speaking, this is one of the big criticisms of anarchism is like, if the proof's in the pudding, where's the pudding? But, you know, I feel like it's common when you start talking with anarchists about, I mean, for me, literally, I came to this independently when I was going through a phase kind of thinking about all this stuff. Am I an anarchist? Whatever. I remember distinctly where I was sitting even. I was at a desk and I was like, how do anarchists take power? And it was an inability to answer that question that really started sharply leading me away from anarchism. And you have conversations with anarchists along those lines, and there's never really an answer. It always seems like hypotheticals. I at least am at a stage in my life where I need to move beyond hypotheticals really, really badly. So another commenter adds, anarchists do decent capitalism critiques, but beside that, anarchist theory is boring as shit. I mean, to me, it's like, it's more than boring. It's wrong. I mean, you read it now and knowing, about the history of a century of national scale successful socialist struggles, I just don't feel like anarchists really have. I feel like it's implicitly discredited by the lack of their ability to be competitive at all in terms of like guiding movements towards anything resembling success at all. So anyway, that's my take on it. Let's see. Any recommendations for a good history of the USSR? I'm gonna have to come back to you on that. As far as like an overall history of the USSR, I know of some. As far as the best, not ready to make that recommendation right now. I don't know if anybody else has things they want to throw out in the chat. Somebody asks, can I, just a personal request, can we not phrase questions as what are my thoughts on? I'd love for this to be more of a conversation, and honestly, just being like pumped for answers. Imagine we're meeting at a party. Normally, you don't just like walk up, shake somebody's hand, and be like, "Thoughts on China?" Anyway, that it gets a little draining for me. But anyway, thoughts on leftists participating in the stock market. What should be the relationship between leftists and the stock market? Honestly, I'm not even going to touch that. just not feeling it today. Let's see. Somebody asks, am I a real communist? Had no idea there are actually any communists left. I would say so, yeah, and there are some actual communists left. But tons of opportunists also, for sure. What do we have here? Reading through the chat. Somebody says they're being offered to take up plumbing and learn a trade that they like. The job could pay 4 times what they're making now. The only issue is the owners are right-wing petty bourgeois types that don't believe in COVID. Should you set aside your morals to get ahead in current economy? I'm not sure that I would really phrase like the concluding like, and so to sum up, should you set aside your morals to get ahead in the economy? I don't I That's not really to me the like fundamental question in the issue that you're raising there. So I mean I get kind of the issue. So I mean I don't know. Do you want to learn plumbing? What do you do for work currently? So you're saying that it would be a 4 times pay increase. I will tell you that doing, learning a useful, I'm not going to say even trade, because I think sometimes there's this weird sort of reverence of like, oh, trades, I work with my hands. I mean, I know some things where I can work with my hands, but also plenty of stuff today. You can do a lot of work by pushing buttons, and that's valid too. The issue is, are you, adding anything of value to society? I think that's kind of more the question. But so yeah, I mean, plumbing, is it a stable career? Yeah, probably. I mean, I'm not a plumber, so as I mentioned in one of the previous COVID videos, happened to mention I'm not a plumber. Um, but I mean, is it something you want to do? You could make a lot more money. Certainly, that would help in the imploding economy that we're currently facing. Making more money is better than making less money. The question is, are you doing it? I mean, plumbing is useful no matter sort of what mode of production you're in. So it's, sort of quote unquote valid from that sense. It's a useful thing. People need their pipes fixed. Um, The only issue is that the owners are right-wing petty bourgeois types that don't believe in COVID. So, I mean, unfortunately, you just described a lot of people, including a lot of people that if you don't become a plumber, you could end up working for. So, if the question is, do you do some kind of apprenticeship with them now? I don't know exactly what the arrangement is, but if you do some kind of apprenticeship or whatever, study under them for a couple of years, and then you can go do your own thing. I mean, to me, that sounds like not a bad plan. Because if you don't go do something where you can sort of start your own, plumbing service and whatever, or at least, be an independent contractor or something like that, you're going to wind up probably working for some right-wing petty bourgeois capitalist that you're going to make rich at your expense. And, so I guess that would be sort of my answer to that part of the question. And I don't really see this as setting aside your morals. To me, the question would be more, can you stand to be around these people for however long it takes you to do your apprenticeship? Um, you know, so, I mean, and will they tolerate you wanting to wear a mask or whatever you want to do? I think those are more the questions. Anyway, that's my answer. Feel free to ask a follow-up if you have any more specifics. Let's see. So, the COVID content, another commenter says, has been great. Even though I'm not in the US, I still find it important to listen to them because it seems like every capitalist country is heading down the same road now. Yes, that is correct. It seems like every capitalist country is getting their orders straight from headquarters, straight from international capital, for sure. Listening to the info at S4A is something that you wouldn't get anywhere else. Well, good. I get something out of it. I like to stay up with the news on COVID, and doing those videos, does help me to stay current with it, and it helps me kind of vent a little bit. Something that I'm trying to do on the channel also is teach critical thinking. So, I'll read mainstream articles and try to engage with them critically and sort of model that for people, asking questions about it, interjecting, because, as teachers have told me in the past, reading should not be a passive activity. You should read with pen in hand. I mean, obviously, this is back in the day where more things were on paper, but when you read, you should be making notes, asking questions of the text, etc. And I try to model that and help people out with that. I mean, functionally, the channel is about education more than anything else. I mean, I get kind of a lot of shit from people that I try not to like have escalating into drama too much, but like fundamentally it's about education. The difficult thing, this versus a classroom, is I can't actually grade people. So, and people are on a very drop in, drop out basis. So there's not necessarily any real commitment to sort of staying the course, building that sort of relationship. But I do what I can, and yeah, it's extremely concerning. It looks like we're just weeks away from another major COVID wave. I just put up a couple of videos on that this weekend and yesterday. Actually, the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki, just tested for COVID. People were saying she had been recently pushing the idea that people can't get reinfected. That's bullshit. People definitely were getting reinfected with Omicron. The other issue about Omicron is you have BA.1, and there's a couple of different BA.1s. There's like BA1.1, and then BA, I think it's like 1.1.531 or something like that. So there's like a couple of BA.1s, and then BA2 is coming in now. That's what's causing the wave in Asia and Europe. And BA1 and BA2 are not a parent-child relationship. They are more like siblings or cousins. So the cross immunity, if you had BA.1, you will have some cross immunity as far as the antibodies in your body to the BA2, but it's not going to be 100%. So that you can get reinfected and get sick, absolutely. So as far as what I was reading, she had COVID in like sort of October, November during the Delta wave, and then just got it again, and she was having meetings with Biden. Now, I mean, they're vaccinated, and I'm sure that they're going to get every drug under the sun that can treat it. Would look pretty bad to have like Biden croaking from like COVID like a year into his presidency. Not good optics. And plus, then Kamala would have to become president. She can't string a fucking sentence together. But yeah, I mean, this thing is real. There's another wave incoming, and yeah. So anyway, I'm glad you appreciate the content. There's more coming. I kind of burnt out on covering COVID. Back in January, I did during the height of the Omicron wave, which was just shocking, stunning how bad that got. And we'll see how BA2 ends up turning out, but it's looking bad also. I did 13 videos in a row on COVID. I still have a few leftover articles on COVID, which I may start sprinkling in. I didn't really cover it as much in February because, there was this lull and nobody wanted to hear about it. I didn't want to talk about it anymore. I mean, but that next wave is coming. But honestly, I mean, let's say that it's March 22nd today. I think that it's reasonable to think. They say that BA2 starts really acting up when it hits 50% of the overall COVID cases. Right now in California and in the Northeast and in a couple other areas in the U.S., it's at like 38% share. And actually, I haven't even looked at the updated figures for this week. It could be in the 40s by now. So in another couple of weeks, it'll be crossing that 50% mark. And apparently that's where things kind of get out of control. And so let's say then it's March 22nd. In 3 weeks, April 15. So that's where in January, middle of the month, January 15, that's where the Omicron BA1 spike was, like the peak of it. So now we're getting massive waves 3 months apart. That's not good. BA.1, that was significantly worse, like 3.5 times worse than the Delta curve. 3.5 times worse than any curve up to that point, roughly. So, this is likely the future. No amount of, wars breaking out or whatever is going to cover it up. Excuse me. So expect bad times. Like I'm sort of bracing for impact. We got like a month and a half off. And then, and that's in the U.S. where the curve actually did come down. In Europe, a lot of the countries, some of them, like I saw Wales, the curve had come way down. But a lot of the countries, like the curve never even came all the way down to like pre-Omicron levels. Like even when it came down in February and early March, it was still higher when it changed course and started going back up. It was higher at that trough than it was at the Delta peak back in the fall. So pretty bad scenario, and now they're talking about the U.S. Congress didn't fund boosters again, and it's anyway not good news. All right. Avenging Pineapple says, do communists suffer persecution? Yeah, it depends what country you're in. Some countries have better political freedom and freedom of speech, but others don't. Also, political persecution doesn't always take like the obvious overt form of, it's explicitly illegal. Like, for example, in the U.S., the war on drugs that started like basically as a reaction to, I would say, the New Left. It was like, hey, Nixonian type counter reaction, which was sort of laying the groundwork for neoliberalism. This is hugely unpopular. Why don't we just imprison everybody who doesn't like us? So what do? You make something illegal that is associated with the culture of, the population that you're trying to oppress. So, I mean, I think it should be stated clearly. I don't know if I've come out and said this, but cannabis, I mean, while, if you overuse cannabis, you can wind up temporarily impaired. I mean, like extreme cannabis use, like you can definitely get temporarily incapacitated. And with too much use over a short span of time, you can wind up like temporarily having psychotic symptoms. They do go away though, for most people. Relatively harmless as far as like, that. If used in moderation and its effects are understood and you don't engage in like, operating heavy machinery, et cetera, very low risk behaviorally. I mean, health-wise, I don't, smoking anything is not good for you, but I mean, you can get edibles or something like that really has no issue. But anyway, point being, nothing really wrong with cannabis used even slightly responsibly. But, they made it illegal, and that gave a pretext for locking up lots of people who, thought outside the box and were more opponents of the capitalist, counter-revolution that was making its way in at that time, and it's just continued since, and it's a racist policy and everything else. So there you get I would argue, a kind of political persecution that doesn't overtly look like political persecution. But then in other areas, like communist parties are just flatly illegal. All right? And then, but there's also the thing of like, you don't need to make illegal what you can control and neutralize by other means. So, if a ruling class can effectively neutralize communist opposition and prevent a movement like that from taking off without making it illegal, which can sometimes activate, sort of like the Streisand effect or, some sort of like a martyr effect, wind up calling more attention to it, then they want to avoid that. So, yes, communists suffer persecution. It really depends where you are, though, the extent. But, I mean, it's not really popular anywhere. And again, a lot of the places that are not socialist countries where communism is tolerated, it's usually only because it's tolerated in some kind of, very revisionist, like opportunist, non-revolutionary form. So, anyway, that would be my answer to that right now. So, continuing. Anyway, there's some dialogue around that. And yeah, no, I can understand like that you find it rare to meet actual communists. Yeah, it's not that common, especially if you're in the U.S. or somewhere. So for sure. Somebody says, hi from Brazil. Hello to you. All right, so Another comment, anyone else terrified about how quickly liberals turned into fascists? I think it was there the whole time. I mean, honestly, like, I got into like real world left stuff about 20 years ago, like Iraq War. And I'll tell you, even just around the Iraq War um, versus the war on terror, you would see, hold on, I got to take a sip of water. You would see, and kind of still do, actually, even like Tulsi Gabbard, the quote anti war candidate, TM, does this too, where people, liberals would be against the Iraq war because it was, quote, Bush's war. But they would be pro war on terror, which is a meta war which enabled the U.S. to basically invade any country that it said, like looked at terrorists once. And there were a lot of people who opposed the Iraq War specifically. I mean, and don't get me wrong, it's one of the worst crimes of the 21st century so far. But they were like then on board with all the other stuff being done in the war on terror. How do you know this for sure? Well, when the Democrats took the House and Senate in 2006, the mantra was quickly impeachment is off the table because people really wanted to do something about Bush and Cheney. But Pelosi and Conyers, impeachment is off the table. That's what they said. And then Obama got in and it was like, what war? What are you even talking about? Also 2008 happened, so people stopped talking about war in general. But anyway, I assume that this comment is about primarily what's going on with the Ukraine war. And first of all, let me say, don't think that you know all of what is going on in this war from either side. I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter, and I note it. Like, okay, noted. This has been presented as XYZ. But they call it the fog of war for a reason, and we don't really know what's going on. Pay attention, but we're just a few weeks into this, and I think it's going to take a while before the truth of, and this is not just about Ukraine and Russia, it's like any war. It takes a while to actually see what actually happened because everybody's lying, okay? It's one of the reasons why we want to avoid war. It's the complete breakdown of social order. Absolute atrocities happen on every street corner, and it's just an absolute nightmare. And as they say, truth is the first casualty. There's propaganda from all sides flying around right now. And just all I'm saying is take everything that you see with a grain of salt, note patterns, note sources, but try to reserve some judgment. It's extremely difficult to know what is actually happening in a war several weeks into it, especially with just all the stuff that can be done, the deep fakes and things that can be done with technology today, let alone just normal Photoshop. So there's a ton of crazy shit going on. But yes, I think that as far as the libs like turning into fascists and supporting neo-Nazis in Ukraine, I gotta think a lot of the garden variety liberals have no idea what's going on. They just hear something on cable news and that's the end of it for them. So I doubt that they're dedicated active Nazis. I think that they're probably very politically ignorant. So and it's more the people who know what they're doing and what they're talking about that you kind of have to worry about. I think most other people really have genuinely no idea. Remember, I posted a while back, there was a YouGov poll. 55% of U.S. Americans think that Russia's still socialist. So, as far as libs following fascist talking points, they'll kind of follow any talking points that get presented to them as you put a puppy next to it and they'll support it. So yeah, this is why we have to go deeper. So anyway, what else do we have? Back on the anarchism topic. For one commentator, it was the lack of a scientific analysis of society and just lack of materialist thinking that made them stop being an anarchist. Yeah. Yeah, it just doesn't go anywhere, I don't think. Let's see. Thoughts on people that ask questions with thoughts on? My thought is it gets a little old. I'm sure that it's coming from a decent place, and I respect the fact that people are interested in hearing my opinion on something. Also, just like understand being on this side of the table, it's like understand that there's hundreds and hundreds of people coming at me a week. So, you know, that's all I'm saying. Let's be friends. Let's be comrades. Let's be comrades. All right. Let's see. Somebody recommended, as far as Russian history, Sheila Fitzgerald's The Russian Revolution. I've seen that one recommended before, yeah. Somebody else says, first stream that they've caught, been following the channel and discovered by the COVID recap videos. Very insightful. Really enjoyed them and the debate reviews. Well, thank you, and glad that it's helpful. I've been considering doing a... I know this is like super old at this point, but considering Zizek Peterson debate highlights reel, because the thing itself is 2.5 hours. My video would be like 6 hours, and nobody's got time for that. But I've seen clips from it, and it's like obvious Peterson does not have a fucking clue what he's talking about. And then Zizek isn't really a Marxist anyway, so it just seemed like such a bizarre debate. But should get a lot of views for the channel. No, I don't actually do stuff that is just about views for the channel, at least not so much. I mean, honestly, I spend most of my time doing audiobooks that like 400 people listen to, because that's what I'm trying to read for the people who are actually trying to learn this stuff. And if I just wanted to do clout and clickbait, believe me, I would not be posting... What did I post recently? Youth Against Fascism by Georgy Dimitrov. Or what else is up here? You know, The National Question by Rosa Luxemburg. I'm doing it so that people actually interested in Marxism can learn actually Marxism. So anyway, on the job question before, the thing about the plumber, somebody says, take the job, bro, you can't eat morals. True. I mean, to a point. Like, yeah, don't sign up for a job where you're, like, killing children. But, you know, like, there's an alternative. As far as plumbing, though, I would consider plumbing pretty morally neutral. Somebody says there's a union for plumbers. Pretty sure there's a union for plumbers. And maybe you could work for them for a while and try to get with the union. Yeah, I mean, I would assume so. So, yeah. Let's see. Somebody else adds, take the job. I learned a trade, got into pest control, but it's not perfectly ideal, but I'm surviving better now than I ever have. Most of my coworkers are reactionary, and it's ugly seeing the property management side, but I'm housed and saving money. Yeah, I would just add, watch out for chemicals, man. I'm sure you've got a variety of tactics. I just immediately, like... I just see somebody outside a building like spraying like horrible shit. Don't get fucking cancer when you're like 50. You don't want that. But I hear you. That it's real. I mean, my own situation. Let's just say I'm appreciating the Patreon help because, man, overeducated, underemployed, just having jobs. I'm trying to get back into something new, as far as like an upgrade, because it's fucking. You know, retail, and that's, you know, all that kind of stuff. The options are just not there unless you have really specialized training. I was actually myself looking at getting into some specialized training this winter, and Omicron hit, and I was like, I'd prefer not to die. So we'll see if I'm able to get back into that in the future. But yeah, it is rough out there. It is rough. But yeah, if you got an opportunity to get into plumbing, I mean, I think as far as like from more of a working class perspective, I think it is one of those things. I could be wrong on this, but I mean, I think it's one of those things where, relatively speaking, within a working class format, you can sort of like write your own ticket if you get into it. So anyway, continuing on the topics of morals versus working in certain positions, Ugopnik has a video on the topic called The Socialist Guide to Surviving in Capitalism. It's a great video. Yeah, I've actually seen that one. I don't think I watched the whole thing. I often do not have time to watch the entire video, whatever, but I've started to skim that. And yeah, he definitely does address those topics. So what would be considered a modern lumpenproletariat? Somebody answers the breadtube crowd. So my understanding of lumpenproletariat is, I mean, it means basically, well, that the word lumpen was a prefix in German, applied to many words. I do know a little German. It's a language of compound words. They love putting things together and making new words. But like lumpen, it means, I think, rags. And so it was a prefix often applied to other things to like signify kind of like ragamuffins or like street urchin, but like kind of like pickpockety type implications. That it was meant to me. I think then it was translated in the early Marx as like the dangerous classes. So it was more of like people who were not capitalists, but were like not people who went to work. It was like a criminal element. So somebody adds gangbangers, for example, are generally lumpen. And somebody else says criminals, the types who are out in the streets and not in banks and suits. And somebody else says lumpen is generally described in the USA as unhoused people, convicts, etc. Somebody else says certain drug dealers, but the line between lumpen, prole, and black market capitalists not as sure on. Yeah, somebody says lots of crypto people have a lumpen mindset. I'm going to come back to this, to the broader topic in a second. I just want to comment because that's, I think, a very excellent insight. Yeah, there's a fine line between get rich quick and go mug somebody. But this isn't even about mugging people. It's about the crypto libertarian criminal nexus. It seems to me like sort of the line between, I mean, you said lots of crypto people have a lumpen mindset. I would say a lot of libertarians in general have a lumpen mindset. I mean, we see some of the most like morally noxious examples, like people, you know, getting upset with the age of consent, for example. That tends to be associated with libertarians. But I mean, in especially if you go back to like 70s libertarian stuff, which was fucking crazy. Go to, I mean, there's like publishing houses, stuff like Feral House, and they would publish all this kind of crazy stuff that like libertarians and survivalists love. Not all of them are like these flag-waving paleocons. There's, at least used to be, this subset of libertarians who were like these kind of just like far out, whacked out criminal types, and like borderline like supervillain. And some of it would come from this kind of anarchist individualist, like nobody can control me sort of mindset. But yeah, there's sociologically speaking like some fascinating stuff going on there. People who would get into like you know, faking their own death and like just trying to live completely unhindered by anything. And sometimes, yeah, you can't always make a quote like honest living doing that, but without getting into like being a, you know, exploiting other people through like the accumulation of capital, stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, people who get their money not from working but from kind of illicit activities. Although somebody said the line between like lumpen and black market capitalism is different. I think there, I mean, we're talking about how much capital do you actually command. That would be, you know, generally, I mean, in the legal capitalist realm, I mean, usually we go by like, okay, are you petty bourgeoisie or are you big bourgeoisie? And it's defined by basically how much capital is at your disposal. So anyway, modern lumpen proletariat, yeah, I mean, it gets complicated in places like the U.S. because, as one commenter points out, those who society deems unfit for good work. We live in an incredibly racist country in the U.S. with like several layers of racial oppression, and who, who even gets an education? Like, is there even like a functioning school in your community? Because a lot of that's like funded by property tax, and then that becomes just sort of like a downward spiral. So there's a lot of people that come out and maybe can't get a job, and like, what do you do at that point? And this is a systemic problem. It's also one of the reasons that socialists want to give people an education so that everybody can participate, not just in political life, but I mean in meaningful jobs, and you can of course restructure jobs also so that they can be more, all the jobs are more meaningful in the first place, and that also people have the kind of education that you can actually do things, stamping out illiteracy, which continues to be a problem, because the bottom line is, you pop out in your late teens and don't have that family support for one reason or another, or just expected to like pull your own weight. You can't get a job for one reason or another, but I mean, you still need money. So yeah, just that is a huge topic, but hopefully that moves you along a little bit. We'll see if there's other comments that come up on that. Sorry, my throat's a little dry. I feel like my voice keeps cracking. I'm trying not to interrupt, though, by like taking sips of water, and I'm just let's just take a sip of water. How about that? There we go. Okay, so original commenter said, that's what I assumed. Considering selling weed, and a comrade was like, lumpen. There you go. So another commenter says, good to see. I'm reading Parenti. Also suggests Domenico Lacerdo. Yes, it's on the list. He was an Italian Marxist who passed away a couple of years ago. Has a good book on Stalin, another one on liberalism. Yep, it's in the hopper. I probably won't get to it for like a year. That's my guess. What else? So, not sure what's going on with this commenter, but may need to be removed from chat. Okay. Somebody else says, I use Emacs to capture notes as I read for ebooks, but pen and pad for paper books that I then transcribe in Orgrome. The Slipbox method works for me, but everyone has their own system. Yep. Yeah, I just write in margins and stuff like that. Obviously, when I'm doing the audiobooks, I just do my, patented quick comments. And, I notice how many people, I'm sure there's a few people who don't like them, but a lot of people comment on how, they have attention span issues or, whatever. I mean, you're listening to a voice just like read something at you for a while. It helps a lot of people stay focused. It's the same thing. It's because reading should not be a passive activity. It should be an active, engaged activity. You should engage with the text. When something that you read really strikes you, you should make a note of it. You should go, aha, and so such and such, and write it down maybe if you're using a physical book. It's going to help you develop your thought process and may lead to future strains of research questions that you can follow up and go, oh, I was meant to look up XYZ. And writing it down or typing it out, whatever, starting a new folder on your computer, it can serve as a reminder. And maybe you don't get to it for 2 years, but like you can follow it up eventually and be like, that way you're tying all your knowledge together. Making those connections is important. So anyway, all right. What else do we have? So somebody else says BA2 is 50% of COVID cases in my state. Well, buckle up. I would not go to any restaurants for a while. That would be me. Because they say that 50% is where BA2 starts to show its severity. We're basically there now. I mean, I think areas that aren't there yet are going to be there basically by early April. So, yep. So anyway, person who asked about plumbing said you hit the nail on the head. But anyway, insert carpentry joke here. Thanks. Just to clarify, the way that I phrased it was correct. I feel like I wouldn't be able to hide my socialist views around reactionaries. And my current job allows me to express myself honestly. That's, again, it might be worth it, though, to, like, hold your tongue for a couple of years. to make 4 times the money down the line and get out of that situation, because then you wouldn't have to, hold it. I mean, again, it's like, what's it worth to, sorry, there was no way to save that sentence. Which is worth more to you? Like, hold it in at work for 2 years and make 4 times the money then for the rest of your life, or stay in your current situation and really, really struggle. And I got to be honest, like, the consequences of being poor have not been this severe in a long time, if ever. Homelessness is like a massive problem. I didn't know that in 2022 I'd be on a live stream cautioning people not to like underestimate the very real threat of becoming homeless if you're regular working class making between minimum wage and $5 over minimum wage. But it's a very real thing, and I would really, really weigh that carefully. Okay, so hello from Australia. Hello to you too. Hold on, I just gotta remove a few folks from the chat. Somebody else. Okay. Yeah, there's a few people in the chat that I don't mind, that obviously aren't here to be productive but aren't being super disruptive. And the rest of you are definitely helping them not be disruptive by not feeding them. So anyway, well, continuing. Chat mods, yeah, I don't think it's necessary. What else do we have? Am I pro cannabis? So yeah, I think I just covered that. I don't know if that comments from there. I'm not pro cannabis in the sense of like everyone go take cannabis right now. It's just, I think it's not the worst thing in the world. You know what I mean? For the amount that people drink alcohol in particular, people substituted that with cannabis, the world would be healthier in many ways. Although, again, it is fairly incapacitating. It has a lot of drawbacks, and a lot of people just don't like it. So there's that too. All right. Gotta remove a person or two here. There we go. All right. What else do we have? One of Nixon's advisors is quoted as confirming what I'm saying regarding the war on drugs. He said that it was a means to target groups on the left and using social... Yeah, I've read that. The guy's name escapes me at the moment, but yes, I've read that too. What do we have here? All right, there's too much going on in the chat here. So just give me a minute to go through for questions that I actually want to engage with here. So somebody says, I'm actually starting to believe that most mental health issues are completely fake, just a way to consume your way into your ideal self. I do not think that at all, actually. So honestly, I'm not really sure where to begin with that. No. Mental illness and mental suffering are very real things. I think that we're seeing a point in time where people are extraordinarily unhappy. Actually, this reminds me. I'm going to just make myself a note right now. There was a study that I saw. I've referenced this before, I think, in live streams, where 20 years ago, people in the U.S. had many more friends than they do currently. Like, people on average today have an average of like 3 friends, and 20 years ago it used to be more like a dozen. So mental health across the board is getting worse and worse, and a lot of it's due to just complete alienation, like, from society in general. That's not entirely it, though. But anyway, I'd be curious if you could elaborate on that a little bit, because you had just a way to consume your way into your ideal self. And I don't honestly really see the connection there. I'm willing to hear the rest of the comment, but I don't really agree with that. Let's see. Okay. Okay, here's a different subject. Have I read Mark Fisher's Capitalist Realism? I have not. Continuing, in it, he makes what to me seems rather dubious and dangerous claims around mental health. He seems to attribute mental health conditions primarily to capitalism and the increase in mental health issues as solely a function of late stage capitalism. Yeah, just to be clear, I'm not attributing it solely to that, although I think it's not helping anything, it's definitely a contributor. He provides no sources, well, that's always a red flag, isn't it? And doesn't seem to consider that the increase may be due to advances in science and community health measures. Do you mean like increased diagnosis? I'm not sure it's just that either. For example, like anxiety is becoming a massive problem in a way that it kind of wasn't before. I think some of that has to do, honestly, with, and again, this is not one thing. I mean, it's across the board. Actually, I'm not even going to get into that right now. It's just too much to try and unpack in a live stream. But I don't think it's just like being diagnosed more either. Somebody else says, different subject, Zizek is a Hegelian idealist. Even his understanding of Lacan is garbage. People should not read him for any Marxism. If I had a little sound effect of people cheering, I would play it. Yay! That's my answer to that. Yeah, I don't really get people's like fascination with Zizek at all. All right, somebody else says, hello guys, glad to be here. Hello to you. And let's see. So the OP on the mental health thing says, one way to look at it is to examine how other countries handle mental health. So I do know something about this, and there are cultural expressions of mental health, and there are phenomena that are kind of like culturally specific. Like in some cultures, if you get depressed, particularly over certain issues, the standard expression is like not eating. And like other times, like what else? Eating disorders tend to be more of a Western thing. And as Western culture advances in non-Western countries, the eating disorders start to surface. So it seems like, in some ways, expression of mental suffering and things like that are culturally mediated. And I mean, there's a whole number of examples of that. So as far as how other countries handle mental health, it's not always one-to-one. This is a really big discussion that can't really be done full justice here. But anyway, let's see. Somebody else says, remember, it is now common information that if you want to dominate a society of living humans, just take over their healing centers. That way, when you wound them, they can never fully heal from the damage you have caused them. I don't know what you mean specifically, but yeah, I mean, as far as at least the area where that rings true to me is, I think people just don't know how to talk to each other anymore. I mean, it's kind of what I was saying about people having friends. This isn't entirely the problem because, there's a lot of problems that people have with family or school or work that can cause massive depression, anxiety. I mean, again, I've mentioned several times in this stream alone, what an incredibly racist country the U.S. is. Also, all the other kinds of special oppressions, sexism, heterosexism, transphobia, on and on, religious, like Islamophobia, etc. So people face all kinds of really antagonizing situations, particularly screen time on social media is awful. Never before in human history did people, and especially like 13-year-olds, find themselves subjected to the random opinions of creepy anonymous weirdos from all over the world, sometimes by the hundreds. It's really bad, and we don't seem to have like the cultural resiliency. Like we don't have remedies for these things. So there's been a lot of studies on that. Actually, my browser crashed the other day and I lost some of the history, but I was just reading an article about mental health in girls is like a massive problem, particularly anxiety. And it's known to correspond with social media use. I mean, I know just getting off of Twitter, it's like I want to get into a fist fight. I mean, it's aggravating, really. It's like, and by the way, don't get into fist fights. I'm just saying it just gets your like adrenaline up. You know what I mean? It's bad times because you just never know who's going to be coming at you, and there's just literally millions of randos out there ready to pounce. So I think that that's a contributing factor. It's not really. This is something that the human psyche is just not prepared to deal with. Usually, when we take criticism or feedback from people, it's coupled with a lot of social context. Like if somebody in school, is giving you a hard time, there's a lot more context about who that person is, who they're friends with, what their background is, what their parents are like, on and on. Just to take one example. But trying to deal with sort of anonymous aggression from people, it's extremely difficult. Trying to fit in that kind of an environment, incredibly difficult. So anyway, not trying to like pinpoint it all to this, but I think that's one factor. These things aren't getting any better with social media, let me put it that way. So, somebody else says, or you can have the doctors in your country prescribe opioids like candy, that way so, yeah, I think maybe your understanding of that issue is a little bit distorted. The overuse of opioids is a catastrophe. Something a lot more needs to be done about it. In fact, bringing up the cannabis thing from earlier, again, looking at cannabis relative to alcohol for quote-unquote recreational purposes, or looking at it compared to opioids for like pain relief purposes, there's just no comparison in terms of like the harm that is caused. There's some things like heart health it may actually even be good for. So, yeah, anyway. Continuing. Okay, more people... okay, let me just ask you now. Stop asking for mods. It's not going to happen. The lag in me reading questions, it's not really being caused by the trolls. It's I just take a long time answering questions. So anyway, scrolling down. I've come across the term Campism, and I feel that these leftists are more anti-American rather than anti-imperialism, fitting perfectly. So you're saying it fits in the campist category to be anti-American rather than anti-imperialism. I got to say, this whole topic just kind of, Campism, it's not like a big thing that resounds with me, but the general phenomenon that you're talking about sort of being anti-U.S., or there's a lot of things that are being passed off, I guess we could say, as anti-imperialist, which are not actually anti-imperialist, in any kind of real sense, in any kind of socialist sense. So, in fact, there was a post that I made on the S4A community tab. Let me bring it up right now. So I mentioned the real way to oppose NATO imperialism and expansion in 2022, and that's important, we'll come back to that, is by doing socialist organizing. Relying on rival gangs of capitalists to oppose each other isn't it. When capitalism was just coming up and the proletariat hadn't developed, okay. Maybe then you form an alliance with capitalists. But that was ages ago. So you can see it even in 1935. Dimitrov, writing for the Comintern, talking about the united front of proletarian groups and parties versus the popular front of proletarian groups aligned with some petty bourgeois and non-proletarian and peasant groups and parties. But he said even in 1935, what matters is the class composition. So in the more advanced countries, like the UK, where capitalism is well on its way, the peasantry is basically gone, and the proletariat is big enough to act on its own, then you don't need a popular front. You just do the united front. And this is even more the case in 2022. How has capitalism changed the class composition of your society? So you get a lot of people who are, again, hyping up one gang of capitalists over another, being like, they're anti-imperialist. That's not, this idea that you're going to get different factions of imperialists somehow keeping each other in check. If you're not actually doing the socialist organizing, none of this can be taken for the proletariat's benefit. And that is the point. So it's a general principle, not just in social conflict, but in general, that crises are vulnerable points for the status quo, and they can be taken advantage of by different groups. If we want to take advantage of a crisis in capitalism for the working class, for the proletariat, then we have to be organized enough and active enough to be able to do it. Otherwise, guess what's going to happen? Some gang of capitalists is going to take advantage of that to try to get a leg up, try to get a bigger piece of the pie, etc. So socialist organizing is the key. I was just tweeting at somebody else the other day about, what was the thing? Oh man, my mind just went completely blank. I know what I'm talking about, and it was just like RAM failure. Oh yeah, it was the heightening the contradiction thing. And I gotta say, as far as my mind going blank, just thinking about Twitter, it's like the overload is very real. Anyway, we gotta heighten the contradiction. At some point, the contradiction is heightened fucking enough. It's just a lack of fucking organizing. So the contradiction can be heightened as much as you please. If you're not organizing, you're not going to be able to take advantage of it for the working class's advantage. If you don't have revolutionary socialists ready to do something, then you're not going to be able to do something, and therefore nothing will happen. And what will happen? Capitalism just drags on and on and on, and there's never any socialism. So actually, coming off of this thought, another thing that I put up today, 6 hours ago, according to YouTube, I said, I'm intrigued by all the, quote, multipolar discourse that's been popping up lately. I get that it's an assertion of a movement from, and I don't mean movement like a social movement, but it's just a change in conditions from a, quote, unipolar world that's dominated by the U.S. We heard a lot of talk about this after the destruction of the USSR, and particularly when Bush, Cheney, and the neocons came to power in 2000. The whole idea was it's a unipolar world. And this was true even when Clinton was in office in the 90s, the Clinton years. But it was really Bush, Cheney, and the neocons that were unipolar world. It was one of their mantras. And therefore, we should do whatever we want. Their goal was a, quote, new American century. So what did they do with that, quote, unipolar world where effectively nobody could stop them? Well, they started invading a whole bunch of smaller countries in Central Asia and the Middle East for geopolitical reasons and to get oil and all that stuff. So we're moving away from that, quote, unipolar world of 20 to 30 years ago. But as far as this whole multipolarity thing, it seems to me like just more opportunism. In other words, the idea that, quote, anti-imperialists, rather than organizing for socialist revolution, can wait around for different gangs of social democrats at best, because again, this is a situation where there aren't socialist countries, not many of them. We're going to wait around for progressive capitalists or even just nationalistic capitalists to fight with bigger capitalists like the NATO bloc, for example. And eventually, out of these fights between capitalists, we hope, fingers crossed, folks, imperialism breaks down as a result of these wars, and then I guess we sort of claw our way to freedom if the capitalists don't nuke each other in the process. So this, like, everybody cheering on, like, multipolar theory. I put out the question, this, multipolarity. Is there some specific text or prophet of this? Because I've been seeing this more and more. I mean, obviously, yeah, you could say it's a general adjective, but I was wondering, are there specific people, like, thumping at the church of multipolarity? The biggest answer I got was Dugan says it a lot. That's not really a ringing endorsement of the concept. So yeah, like I said, I see all these people. Oh, Russia's anti-imperialist. Yeah. So what if though, in standing around watching capitalists fight with each other, actually it just results in death and destruction, and absolutely horrible conditions for working people, and the capitalists just keep fighting and fighting and fighting without end. You have to organize for revolution. And that's the piece I'm really missing out of this, like, red-brown alliance. The brown is there to get your support for nationalist capitalists. And they're, dragging the reds into it once you're gullible enough to be that opportunist. But what's the end game? Are the browns going to support your revolution? No, they're fucking not. All right? So, yeah, this bothers me. I guess we could say. Anyway, continuing, going back with the chat. Hopefully that's, I didn't really touch on the Campism per se, but there we go. All right. Somebody says, does the accusation of Parenti being revisionist hold any water? I've seen critiques of his support for the late Soviet Union as being socialist. So everybody has their own line as far as, like, when you cross it, that's when you're a revisionist. It's a little bit like calling people un-American. Like, there's not like a set definition of it. Large groups of people will agree on different tipping points for what constitutes revisionism. So it's up to you. Maybe in a few years, I'll get to a point where I feel comfortable sort of. I don't think it's, like, super helpful at this point, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Getting into that. Everybody has their opinion, and I agree with some of them. And I think that if people put half the energy that they put into trying to figure out these questions, if they put half that energy into organizing, we'd be in a lot better shape. So anyway, what else do we have? So yeah, somebody else said Parenti is pretty critical of the late Soviet Union and post-Mao China. So yeah, I mean, he is. Yeah, again, I'm not going to get into this person said this about Parenti. At a certain point, coming off of the last comment, it's like, read the book, but at a certain point, this is about trying to solve political problems in our current world. There's a point at which some of these debates are no longer helpful. Anyway. So actually along this, so somebody says, see, this is one thing I don't understand. Why does it matter if someone is a revisionist? If the idea is good but at odds with orthodoxy, then isn't it okay to revise the orthodoxy? Or do I just not understand what that word means in a Marxist context? Because that could be the case. And I would say yes. I think that maybe you don't understand. It's basically an accusation that people have moved away from fundamental tenets, like fundamental defining tenets. It's not really about revising Marxism in good faith. It's about just a departure from Marxism. It's about abandoning class struggle. It's about coexisting with imperialism. It's about these types of things. Sometimes, I would say, accusations of revisionism come out of misunderstandings of policy, or they come out of criticisms over experiments that a country finds itself inclined to undertake, which other socialists feel is too much of a departure, etc., etc. So I would say that the basic idea of, like, don't be a revisionist yeah, is a good thing because most of the fundamental thing. I think that Marx had a few weaknesses, but they're not on the fundamentals. Um, yeah, I think basically don't move away from the core tenets, but so I'm anti-revisionist in that sense, or in other words, Marxist. Yeah, it's not really about revising orthodoxy in good faith. Just to clear that up. All right. So somebody says Mexican President AMLO said that Mexico won't be sanctioning Russia. I wonder what that'll do to their relationship with the U.S. and under NAFTA too. Yeah, so I haven't seen that particular headline, so I didn't get any of the details on that. But the U.S. is, you know, the U.S.'s answer to everything is, we'll sanction you. And it may be that they are running it. Like, by the way, when I was talking about all the, like, supporting one capitalist over another, I'm saying this in the context of, like, and you're doing what to organize. And also, I haven't heard you talk about revolution at all. So it seems like there's this whole thing of, like, people have just moved so far back from even the idea of revolution. All I ever hear people talking about is just like, ooh, let's support these capitalists over these capitalists. That's the criticism, okay? And I just want to be more clear about that. This is, I think, an ongoing discussion because I don't think, by saying that today, everybody's going to be like, oh, okay, I get it now. I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation, but just want to be more clear on that. Yeah, but the U.S. may be running out of road to a certain extent, or starting to run out of road, that they maybe can't just sanction everybody in the world for as long as they please. Is that a positive thing? I mean, yes. It's also not necessarily due to the heroism of, like, other capitalists, though. It's just that once the U.S. has sanctioned, like, everybody... it's like sort of the sanctions lose their meaning and the other people just fucking start ignoring it and trading with each other anyway. Because it's like, well, we're all sanctioned. We'll just form a club. So, I mean, yeah, that's a consequence of the U.S.'s, like, hegemonic arrogance. As far as... I'm honestly not up enough on the particulars of the Mexican-U.S. economics under NAFTA 2 specifically to comment, but it's like if the U.S., the U.S. to that extent, like just like the U.S. needs China now for manufacturing and things, like there's a lot of deals there. There's a limit to what the U.S. can do to China, and there is, I mean, these are varying limits, but there is a limit to what the U.S. can do to Mexico before it starts shooting itself in the foot. It's just a principle to keep in mind as we move forward watching all this stuff. So, let's see. Going through the chat here. The intersection of capitalism and the internet worked as a solvent on social fabric faster than anyone could even take notice of, I think. Yeah, no one knew exactly what was going to happen. By the way, I found out the other day, it's total just fun trivia. Do you know that there was a Soviet Union domain extension? It was .su. There's a few places that even still use it, although I think Russia owns it now and they're planning to phase it out eventually. But anyway, .su. That would have been if there were Soviet Union websites, or I guess there were, like back in like 1990, like literally the last year before it fell. I think it existed for like a year. Anyway, nobody knew exactly what was going to happen with the internet. It's been a clusterfuck. I mean, honestly, I think there's a lot of good things about the internet. I think it also has made a lot of people crazy. So people have not figured out how to use this thing, to everyone's mutual benefit at this point. Again, the intersection of capitalism and the internet. I mean, I remember the times where, like, if you wanted to put something online, you literally had to know HTML code. Now, there's zero, you just use the upload button or whatever. But yeah, the internet's like super different than it was in the 90s. Let me just say that. Now there's an astonishing amount of content. Actually, you know what? This is going to date me badly, but I remember this commercial that always used to be on. I do not remember what it was for. But it was like a guy pulling into a motel. I think it was like a motel or something, and walks up to a woman standing at a counter, and he's like something like, I forget what he says. What do you offer? And she's like, uh, every piece of information that ever existed, every TV show that's ever been made, every movie ever. And the guy's like, how is that possible? And then I think there was some reference to the internet superhighway at that point. No, sorry, the information superhighway. It's been a while. That was back when people still used that phrase. But yeah, nobody knew. It was exciting. It was weird. I mean, one of the things I enjoyed about the internet was just how much fucking bizarre, fringe stuff you could find on it, particularly in the 2000s. Man, you wanted to. We were talking about anarchism and libertarianism earlier. Oh, take a time machine back to 2000s, 90s internet. You want to see some fucking hot takes? Oh my god. Welcome to my blog. Here's why Christians should be allowed to beat their wives, etc. I mean, you can still find that stuff today. It was a lot more concentrated back then. But yeah, solvent on social fabric. I mean, it has definitely warped people's ideas of what it means to have friends and to have social interactions. Not to mention just the general level of fucking hostility. And, I've been a victim of it, and I have been a perpetrator of it. It's just the fucking tone that's out there a lot of the time. I got immensely sick of it a few months ago, and, actually it was around the war. So it was about a month ago. And I was putting out them like, I block a lot of people just to like stay more focused. And I'm trying to block more people than argue with people because it gets fucking old after a while. It gets really, really old. And I've gotten caught up in it myself, and it's not good. Like, it is not good. And just taking it easier. The hard thing is, people will often talk about things that are deeply personally important to them on the internet. And then some random person will come by and be like, oh, that's so fucking stupid. Which that would never happen to you in real life. Like, or very rarely. And if it did, any bystanders would immediately be like, hey, don't be a jerk. So, yeah, anyway, let alone just the enhanced marketing going on the internet. I hope everyone's using ad blockers. That's an important step as well. Anyway, continuing. Somebody else adds, social alienation is also a consequence of the West's main focus on the service sector, where there's less collective labor like in industry. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, there's labor law changes. There is changes in what the shop floor is about, what's going on the shop floor, like you said. There is, the consequences of sort of devaluing unions in popular culture, things like that. Some of which, honestly, the concessionist unions brought on themselves. So, true. Continuing another comment. Excuse me. I'm like a little stuffy. I'm like talking through my nose here. Yeah, social media is designed to make you feel extreme feelings, whether good or bad, and it keeps you addicted. Absolutely. So actually, when I mentioned earlier, I think it might have been before I started recording, I got like really sick a couple of weeks ago, and I really wasn't online for like almost a week. And when I returned to Twitter, I decided that I would do a lot less arguing on the timeline. First of all, the Twitter account's up around 4,800 subs. Honestly, after it hits 5,000, I don't even know what to do with that many followers. But it's bigger than I ever expected it to be. I really just wanted to post the S4A videos over there. Maybe just keep tabs on the news. It's bigger. In other words, I do not need to promote that thing anymore to like just get it bigger for its own sake. And I decided I would, just not read the notifications anymore. And therefore I would get into fewer arguments and just read fewer antagonistic comments and whatever. And it's not like I'm trying to avoid feedback. It's just that you're really drinking from the fire hose, and there's no real way to limit it to just things that are actually, there's no like constructive comments only filter on there. You just have to take like the abuse with the like good-natured stuff. And I don't, I was like, I'm willing to forgo the like better feedback just to not fucking go like read like insanely upsetting, antagonistic, hostile shit for like no good reason. And what I found was that, as far as it keeping you addicted, I noticed that Twitter, when I stopped engaging with comments and was just doing posts and retweets, it was not showing my posts to as many people. So I think Twitter was actually like punishing me for not getting out into the fray. And I'm like, that is really nefarious. Now, that's anecdotal and it's just sort of my take on what I was observing, but it kind of seemed like I was getting very little engagement on stuff. And but then you notice like you'll go and engage with somebody's comment, and then as your feed reloads, you see their last post that has nothing to do with that comment, but Twitter's like, oh, you like that person? Let's show you some more stuff from them. So it's like, at least in that algorithm, it definitely seems linked to the more you get out there in the fray, which is often abusive, the more that it is. As far as it being addictive, absolutely. It really does make you feel extreme feelings. And I think that there's some level where people know I'm arguing with some total rando over, a brightly colored screen here. And this doesn't matter at all, but it feels like it does. Like it's this illusion that everybody seems susceptible to. You just have to just train yourself to like not go in for it. And I have a certain excuse. I'm doing as like the S4A Twitter to like plug the channel and stuff. But so I take one for the team as far as like building the channel and helping more people to see Marxist content. That's really why I'm doing the channel, because it was hard for me to like stumble onto quality socialist stuff. Not that my stuff is top shelf, but I try to do what I can, make it more accessible and digestible for people. I would like more people to, at least those who are also out there looking for socialist content, I'd like it to be as easy for them to find as possible. So if that means I have to like take one for the team and, do that to like get the stuff more into circulation, so be it. But yeah, it seems designed that way. Anyway. So next comment on the same subject. How should socialists, assuming that they're in power, respond to the social media or tech issue, namely in kids? I'm worried about the super for-profit internet designed to be as addictive as possible, being very bad for kids' brains. So you are correct. Research I've seen on TV and like screens in general is if you have a child under 2, they should not be exposed to any screens at all. And then kids between like 2 and 5, they should only see very limited time amounts of very specific kinds of protein programming. I don't know what that was about. And it should be things where like the whoever the characters are on screen are like talking to the audience, speaking very clearly, like very specific things. There's a lot in developmental psychology that is written about this topic. As far as like socialist countries trying to limit kids' screen time, it's important. I'm not really up to date on what's being done in all the various countries to try to limit that. I understand that there is definitely some efforts being made in that area, but you are correct. It's very bad for kids' development. Very bad. You can see this also because like rich people do not let their kids have like unlimited screen time. And they send them to different schools that have completely different learning structures. This is like, so I'm not an expert on the entire subject, but there's like a thing in education, Reggio Emilia schools. This came out of Italy around World War II, and it was a lot of more left-leaning, anti-fascist and socialist people in Italy. We're trying to rethink education, like to get education out of a capitalist orientation. And one of the things that they came up with was this Reggio Emilia, which is a region in Italy, Reggio Emilia model of education. Now, I don't know if like things have been, that's been superseded by like different things since then, but I was considering actually reading, I have a book about it on the channel, because there's so many different things. When we were talking about lumpenproletariat and like why people, working class people sometimes turn to crime because they like don't have an education in some, not in every case, but sometimes like you just can't get a job, but yet you need money anyway, and people turn to stuff that is, at least illegal, if not also immoral. Not everything that is illegal is immoral. Not everything that's immoral is illegal, as we know. Capitalism's legal. But anyway, yeah, there's just a lot of different things that can be done as far as education. Entirely different models that are more human and humane, and that, as far as how the screens factor into it, this seems to be something that capitalists, are also mindful of. So what do we have? Scrolling through. So I've been going for about an hour and 40 minutes, or hour and a half. So let me look for a few more comments to read before we maybe call it for the week. Somebody says, I recently checked out your Amilcar Cabral audiobook, only a few minutes in, but I'm familiar with Cabral's work. I think not many leftists in the West know or have an idea of his work. More leftists need to look at lesser-known revolutionaries for great ideas. Yeah, Cabral is a big name as far as like African revolutionary efforts. I have several other things from him that I do want to get on the channel, and good. I'm glad that you appreciate that, and I definitely do. I'm planning actually on a big Marx and Engels section coming up soon, and we do a lot of Lenin and try to hit those big names. I definitely do try to mix in lesser known socialists as well. And, there's only so much time in the week. Like I can get maybe, 4 or 5 audiobooks up at most per week, but I do try to vary it. I'm open to people's suggestions too, but it's one of these, it's like advertising, how they're like, they say, takes like 7 times for people to hear something before it really sticks. If people make just one suggestion, it's not likely to appear on the channel. If I keep hearing people request something over and over again, hopefully not the same person, but like if a lot of people request the same thing, that's when it's likely to get done again, qualified by at some point, because there's only so much time in the week. All right. So scrolling through for other questions here. Somebody says on the multipolarity thing, Breakthrough News did an interview with Vijay Prashad on multipolarity. Thank you. I will take that link. Also, Michael Hudson uses that multipolarity and super profits argument, not just Dugan. So, yeah, I'd be curious, if there's anything of typing that in for later reference. I'm curious to see if there's anything of any value there. Again, one of my main criticisms is that all these people who have become cheerleaders for multipolarity are also not emphasizing proletarian organization and revolution, at which point you can have the world as multipolar as you want. If you're not pushing for revolution, it's not going to fucking happen. What else? Okay, and I see regarding the response to revisionism, that was helpful. Good. Glad it was helpful. What else? See. Oh, somebody said about the 1 year of USSR internet. That's cool. I want to see the Soviet version of 90s clip art and GeoCities shit. Yeah, Soviet Union web ring. Here we come. Let's see. Anyone else heard of the 2019 repo market crash? And supposedly the Fed bailed them out from $4.5 to $10 trillion. No, that is a new one on me. I have not come across that at all. If there are more, if you can, before logging off, give me a reference on that, I would be curious. It's one of these things, sounds like big news, but no, I've heard absolutely no mention of that. So, let's see. Somebody mentions on the internet was sold to capitalists cheaply when DARPANET, so that's the Defense Advanced Research Project, as part of the U.S. military-industrial complex, was getting done away with. The internet never had the chance to be used by a socialist model, but it still had aspirational ideals, even in the capitalist world. Somebody else adds, I both love and hate the way the internet developed. I do hate that memes are basically the modern version of just read the headline. but some of the protests that I've seen, I don't think would have happened without the internet. That's what I'm saying. There truly are like upsides and downsides. One thing is, I mean, if we understand historical materialism as, changing property relations that eventually contribute to the breakdown of the existing status quo, definitely. I mean, anything that can be put online can be shared very easily. Like this idea of, they used to call it the sharing economy. I haven't heard anybody mention that in a while. But it's been enormously disruptive to, I mean, for good and bad, like the music industry, the movie industry basically collapsed for a while and still are, I mean, different things have happened there. I mean, it's been enormously disruptive to certain kinds of property rights, which arguably has contributed. This is the first time I'm even saying this out loud, so don't hold me to this, but possibly has contributed to the shift away from, sort of copyright sort of oriented property rights and other things getting like way out of hand. Some of that's just capitalism itself. But it's, I don't know. Like at any other point in history, we need to leverage the internet technology, like every other technology, for proletarian organization and action. It's just that simple. This is, no matter what other questions we're considering, if you don't bring it back to how does this help us stop capitalism, like in a concrete way. Actually, you know what? Somebody, I'm going to read this out loud. I think they might have deleted their own comment. Usually it's me doing the deleting if I just don't want to read the comment anymore. But yeah, I think they unfortunately got rid of this. Let me see if it's still in my notifications, though, because I don't think the deleted comments. Oh, yeah, okay, here it is. So on multipolarity, somebody said, like it or not, it's where we are headed before any kind of global communism. Like, I wish, but probably a lot more years of global competition. Anyway, this ended up with a part that got, I think that they retracted their comment, which, boy, I wish more people would do that. But they were saying that, there's probably going to be years and years of just capitalism going on and like second order capitalist powers rising up and challenging the like top dog capitalists. And the hilarious thing to me, I'm running this channel, Socialism for All, right? We primarily do Marxism, Leninism, but we, look at different types of, basically it's a Marxist unity channel, though I lean most strongly towards Marxism, Leninism. He concludes this whole comment with, I wish that there was a quicker path away from capitalism, but it just doesn't exist. I was like, dude, have you heard of this thing called Marxism? Marx was not just like, let's wait around for capitalism to destroy itself. The idea here, and especially not Lenin, the idea here is organizing for revolution, for fuck's sake. I mean, when you conclude with, that's, to me, I'm like, I rest my case. That is my thesis. Like, that's it right there. That people are moving away from even talking about revolution. When you conclude your thing with like, oh yeah, but multipolar capitalism, it's just we've got to put up with. I wish that there was a quicker way to get away from capitalism, but there just isn't. No. No. Like, how did you even end up on this channel? Why are you here? Anyway. But this is what's going on out there. And this is why I'm just like, what the fuck are people even, like, what are you smoking? Like, it's just one of these baffling moments. All right. What else do we have here? Gonna probably wrap it up in another couple of comments. So somebody says, yeah, I work in social media, and it heavily repressed accounts that don't engage. And if you engage with shit, even in a negative way, it just feeds you more. You have noticed that. It's all on purpose to generate more content and reward people staying on. That's exactly what I suspected, is like, oh, you're not playing our game? Well, we're going to favor people to do. Because what does Twitter want? They're getting people to fucking generate content for their site for free at 1,000,000 miles an hour. What motivates people to do that? Being right. Arguing. Like, that's what motivates people. You're not getting paid to be on there unless your account is like connected with some business or something. You're not getting paid to do it, or unless, the CIA is paying you or whatever. But you're doing it. You're writing fucking treatises. You're writing novels on this site. So yeah, of course they're going to favor people like that. Yeah. Anyway. Continuing. All right, we got some comments. If only those Italians had succeeded completely in taking away all capitalist education systems. My university literally got rid of all its COVID mask requirements, etc., and now I really don't want to go back. Packed classrooms are just why? Like a 500-person lecture hall, no masks, COVID spike? Somebody says, had the same problem last year, continuing. But why? I don't know why universities are so quick to get rid of anything to help students, but will never do anything to get rid of things that actively harm us. Yeah. And, well, somebody adds, my university was basically a for-profit private school, so I guess in my case they did it to cut down on the expenses of keeping up safety measures. But fucking mask mandates are not even expensive. They're minimally disruptive. So, I mean, honestly, like buying masks in bulk at the institutional rate, my God, they're not expensive. Considering all the other expenses that a college has, it's negligible. So yeah, I mean, I'll go you one further. If only those Italians had succeeded completely in having a revolution. Italy was one of those countries that it seemed like, I mean, as with Greece, which is why you saw heavy, fascist and U.S., so U.S. fascist, intervention in Greece on and off, Operation Chaos, things like that. But a lot of communist activity in Italy never quite made the revolution. Oh, actually, I have to call it this. On the Black Shirts and Reds Chapter 1 audio that I put up, somebody commented, I'm just bringing it up now, make sure this is muted. Somebody was like, talking about how people have criticized Parenti for saying that, I don't know if the comment is still up. Oh yeah, here it is. Parenti's assertion that the communist parties of Germany and Italy were not strong enough to wage revolution is unfounded, I believe. Okay, there is a gigantic paragraph after this, but let's just stop right there. The assertion that the communist parties of Germany and Italy were not strong enough to wage revolution is unfounded? Look, I'm not trying to pick on the communist parties of Germany and Italy, but did they succeed in waging revolution? No. Did they have revolutionary moments? Yes. Okay. So I would put that down to strength, right? I mean, if strength is a sort of nebulous term describing all of the various... Sorry, I need more water. My voice is... That was ridiculous. I'm going to wind up on a cringe compilation. One of those voice crack things. There we go. Moisturize the throat. Vocal cords, here we go. All right. Yeah, so if we're taking strong as kind of a, they were doing things correctly and had a lot of numbers and just sort of a catch-all term for, like, the things that you want to see in a communist party. Well, I mean, they had revolutionary moments, and neither one of them pulled it off. And I'm not trying to pick on them, but just objectively speaking, I would say that's like, somebody tried to pick up the barbell, and they couldn't do it, but, then somebody's like, I think it's unfounded to say they weren't strong enough to do it. Well, they couldn't do it, so what else would you say? So, then they come back with, your failure of comprehension is not an indication of the comment being off the mark, blah, blah, blah. Oh, they didn't respond at all. Oh my God. So, anyway, they wrote a whole paragraph starting with that as like their topic sentence. So sorry, this is petty of me, but I need to share with you the pain that I feel running this channel sometimes. So I quoted them. I said, Parenti's assertion that the communist parties of Germany and Italy were not strong enough to wage a revolution is unfounded, I believe. I responded with, there were revolutionary moments in both countries that the parties were unable to turn into revolution successfully. I don't know what else you'd call it. And I mentioned this is the second comment of yours. It's like off the mark. Feel free to delete it at any time. So then they come back with, your failure of comprehension is not an indication of the comment being off the mark. You ask no questions and quite hastily resort to a shrewd and personalist response. It's disappointing, actually. I thought you might actually be a qualitative challenge. That's all I can even hear at that point is just like insane whining. Oh my God. But anyway, yes. If only those Italians had succeeded completely in taking away all capitalist education. How about just if they had taken away all capitalism? That would have been wonderful. And again, it's Italy, one of those countries I feel like had chances at times to do that. In fact, in the video that I put up just now before the live stream on Operation Gladio, this is a supplement to Parenti's Black Shirts and Reds chapter that I put up. There's a video up now. The title is NATO Terrorism in Western Europe, Operation Gladio, 3-part documentary special from BBC Time Watch. And it's about like anti-communist fascist terrorists trying to suppress revolution in Italy by doing false flag stuff. So that was not good. Anyway, another comment or two. I have seen people discussing the idea that we have hit peak oil during the pandemic and the war is kind of a lampshade for a broader problem in energy markets. Do you think that this could turn into a more terminal energy crisis internationally, and what would that mean for the international working class? Not to claim the war is somehow false, it's just a convenient cover for another problem in the short term. Thank you, somebody, for mentioning oil. For fuck's sake, if we know one thing, what have most of the wars recently been fought about? Oil. I mean, I've seen all kinds of crazy shit. You know, it's denazification and what was the other thing? The U.S. wants to stamp out Russian culture. That was courtesy of Nico House. No. How about 50% of the Russian economy is oil and gas? And so looking back at things like the invasion of Georgia in 2008, is there a pipeline involved? Might have been. And then also Crimea. Are there claims to oil, and I don't know if maybe gas, but like oil in the water around Crimea? Yeah. Various things going on there. Yeah. It's just for the amount of like, quote, materialist analysis that people are always, it's like people learn fucking buzzwords. And they don't understand any of the underlying theory. People are like, oh, materialist analysis. And then you never fucking once talk about oil and gas in a country, Russia, that 50% of its fucking economy is fossil fuels. Well, hats off. Good fucking job with your materialist analysis. So as far as, that we hit peak oil during the pandemic, I mean, people are saying we had hit peak oil before that the war is a lampshade for a broader problem in energy markets. Yeah. I mean, also, you look at what's been going on with the value of, just the Russian economy. They were doing real well till about 2013, and not so much since then. So, I mean, oftentimes countries turn to war in scenarios like that. U.S. and NATO, they happen to be top dogs, so they're able to get to all the countries first to hit them up for oil, and Russia needs to do what it's going to do. I'm not saying this 100% about oil, but literally no one is even mentioning it. Now, I did have a commenter who was DMing me with some stuff along these lines, and I have to go back and pull up the links again. Like I said, my browser crashed and I fucking lost them all. But there's a decent correlation between the timeline of conflicts and various events in the oil and gas dispute, and pipeline sort of situation. So it's so frustrating for me. I feel like the fucking discourse around this was better in 2003 and 2004 when people were talking about blood for oil and stuff like that. Now, these like, quote, Marxists are like drooling, hanging off of capitalist Russia, fucking pumping themselves up on every kind of fantasy you can imagine. Just a lot of idealist nonsense going on. And failing to look at some pretty basic questions. All right. That, is theoretically a decent place to end, but I'm going to push my luck and look for another comment or two because I just feel like doing it. And somebody else was mentioning multipolar reference, so I'm going to just copy paste that for later. All right, what else do we have? Oh yeah, actually, so people were talking about the German pipeline, so I'll give you that, but that's not exactly I'm talking more about oil and gas down in the southern southeast area, like more closer to Ukraine. But yeah, it's amazing how this stuff just falls by the wayside. And just reading comments. Russia wants total access to all of the Black Sea oil and gas deposits, and the U.S. is still holding like a fifth of Syria just to have access to the oil production there. Dugan wants the last war for World Island to happen. Like, bruh, nah. Somebody else said, Twitch ate my comment about that oil pipeline being built in East Europe. Okay, Lamau Bezos. So somebody else adds, what do you think the effects of this war on the Middle East and North Africa? The biggest thing I've seen is the food shortages because Ukraine and Russia both are huge exporters of wheat. This is obviously disrupting people's ability to engage in normal behavior. When I say that war is the complete breakdown of any kind of like social order, literally that. And so a lot of African countries import wheat. So same commenter adds Arab Spring 2.0. I hope we can do better than the Arab Spring. But yeah, I mean, unrest in Africa. The problem is crisis does not, and I think I actually finally will end it here. Because this, if I'm going to stress one thing and have Marxists of all fucking people understand one thing, it's crisis does not translate directly into revolution. If you do not have the critical ingredient of organizing using actually socialist theory, crisis just gets that opportunity gets usurped by a capitalist who's going to use it to prop themselves up and get rich and perpetuate capitalism. Without the key ingredient of socialist organizing, you don't get socialist revolution, no matter how many fucking crises your system goes through. So, oh God, somebody in with the pro-Russia talking points. Just get the fuck out of my comments. Seriously. Bye. Anyway, yeah, somebody was in here trying to promote the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. I will read another comment. The Communist Party of Russian Federation capitulates to Moscow's wishes to keep their seats in parliament. They're opportunists at best. Remember what I was saying before about somebody asked, are communists persecuted? You don't have to ban what's already neutralized. And that's my understanding of what's going on there. I read the press release from the Communist Party of the Russian Federation. It sounded exactly like fucking Putin. There was like no difference. So anyway, coming back to Africa, and it's not just Africa, but Africa gets a lot of their wheat from Ukraine and Russia. That gets disrupted. Obviously, things in Africa are somewhat precarious to begin with. That could cause a lot of crisis. China, nobody's brought up really China so much so far in relation to all this stuff. China, to me, I've said and I mean it. China, I see both cause for concern and cause for hope with regard to China. I think that the way that they handle themselves over the next few years, I think will be very telling. They've refused to condemn Russia specifically, probably because they know what that will lead to is like more pretext for the U.S. to attack. And like, honestly, that's not in anybody's interest. That said, they're not endorsing it either. And they keep calling for peace and an immediate thing, and they're sending aid to Ukraine, like food aid and things like that. I think that, but again, what I was saying before too about thinking that you know what is going on 3 weeks into a war, you're lying to yourself. It's called the fog of war for a reason. First casualty of war is truth. We don't know exactly what's going on, but I've seen things to the effect that China is sending aid to Ukraine and they're calling for peace, etc. To me, it seems like Russia's actions are a gigantic embarrassment. I was expecting, as were many people, that it would be the U.S. that would actually start any kind of a conflict to prevent Belt and Road and all that stuff. But I think that China is now faced with a lot of really serious questions. China very involved in Africa. Will they be able to do something to help develop Africa? And I think another point around all that, and this comes back to the sort of opportunist and multipolar stuff and all that kind of stuff. To a certain extent, it seems like China's been trying to do peaceful coexistence, quote unquote, the same thing that was criticized, in the past to the Soviet Union by China. It's not exactly the same, but as far as, we don't interfere in countries, they don't try to help foment revolution so much. And they're doing peaceful cooperative development. Okay, fine, for as long as it works. But we're getting to a point, I think, as far as, multipolar world and socialists just sort of sitting back and forgetting about revolution and promoting capitalists. Well, maybe we wouldn't have to make all these kinds of compromises on who we're working with and who we're supporting if there was more of a focus on revolution. In other words, we got anti-imperialist capitalists, contradiction in terms, but putting that aside for the moment, you can say they're against the U.S., so there's some benefit to be had there. Yeah, but what if we didn't have to make these kinds of compromises? What if there were actual socialist countries, more of them out there, to be supporting? You could do that with a lot fewer reservations and qualifications. And I don't know, is that not a direction that is to be considered? Chinese, communists, there's 90 million people in the party. I'm sure that this conversation is being had somewhere. It's not like, oh, listen to me. I'm sure this conversation is being had somewhere. And I think that they've been trying to do their development to get themselves stronger, and I think that makes a lot of sense. They're also doing concerning things. Like I said, I think that we're going through a very decisive time. Commenter says, China will have to become fully revolutionary again and radicalize all of Africa. I swear to God, that would be like a dream come true. I know that there has been a lot of propaganda about, other countries can't do it for you. Yeah, that's technically true, but there's something called support. Like, we used to have a Comintern that would, really, help other parties in other countries, do things and stuff like that. And, yes, boy, would that be some good news. But again, China also does concerning things, like selling weapons to countries that maybe shouldn't have them. All kinds of stuff. So like I said, it's a mixed bag, and I think that the next few years in particular, with these kinds of crises really heating up, I think it's going to be decisive as far as which side are we going down? Are we continuing to go down the road of compromising and making allies with people who, are just sort of a last resort, etc.? I would love to see less of that, but yeah. Anyway, there's a comment along these lines. I read last week that they had been stockpiling grain and are currently sitting on 60% of the global grain supply. I'm hoping this is something to not be worried about. Somebody else says the food shortage worldwide. It's going to be so fucking horrific for so many people. Yeah, this is what happens when countries fight wars instead of engaging in productive social and economic development. It's a horrible thing that nobody should be cheering on, especially a conflict like Russia-Ukraine that has no particular end game that's clear in the slightest. It seems like the prelude. It has all the hallmarks of a prelude to something else to me than an end. So, so somebody said China sells weapons to absolute monarchies like UAE and Saudi Arabia. That's what I'm talking about. They also do really good things. So that's what I'm saying. Cause for concern, cause for hope. They are taking some stances in the Ukraine thing that I think are much better than a lot of the bullshit I'm seeing online from supposed, anti-imperialists. China is repeatedly just calling for peace and sending aid, food aid to Ukraine, not weapons. Somebody else added, and apartheid states like Israel. Yeah, I don't know what the weapons situation is between China and Israel, but I know they built them like a subway and stuff like that. That's just fucking unforgivable. Now, again, I know China's a big country. It's not, and the party is not monolithic, but that's fucking bad. Like, that's really bad. So, yeah, I mean, I guess, time to wrap up around here, but hopefully food for thought. I want to really thank everybody because I think that we ended with some really interesting food for thought. These are some of the sort of research topics that are most interesting to me. And I think that, the idea, I think, is to improve the quality of socialist discourse and organizing here in the imperial core, stuck as we are with the insanely repressive imperialist government. But we do have the free speech that we have currently, and again, qualified with that we have. Using it to do whatever. But I mean, at a minimum, some of the traps people are falling into, it's crazy making to watch it. Again, it's like everything else. I feel like the China situation with regard to this conflict, cause for concern, cause for hope. What they do here, again, I think is going to be very telling. As far as, does the world socialist movement just need a complete fucking reboot? Or is China going to be directly contributing to a revolutionary reboot? Or will they continue this line of just sort of, compromise and, peaceful coexistence and things? We will see. But I'm going to leave it there and thank everybody for listening. We've been going for about 2 hours, so that was great. I will be putting this on the YouTube channel. Yeah. So, all right, closing thought. Wars divide the people and kill reason and the truth. It is natural for the split to happen. And good ending note. All right, we will catch everybody next time. Thanks to the current patrons whose names are not on the screen, but who are very much appreciated. And we will see you later.